My name is Ashley, and I thought sharing my engagement would bring my family closer. Instead, it tore everything apart. But I've learned, when those who should love you most try to break you, your revenge is living well without them. Before we begin, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know where this story is reaching hearts like yours. Dinner at my parents' house was always an elaborate ritual. White candles flickering in sterling holders, linen napkins folded like little swans, my father's prized vintage Merlot breathing on the sideboard like a guest of honor. And behind every polished detail, my mother, Carol, presiding with that stiff-lipped smile that never quite reached her eyes. I had rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times. I even wore the pastel blue dress she once complimented. Classy, but not trying too hard. As if any part of me hadn't always been trying. We were halfway through the roasted turkey and rosemary potatoes when I did it. James proposed, I said, my voice bright but shaking. He wants to meet you both this weekend. There it was, my joy, laid out like a delicate offering. Carol didn't even look up. She tapped her wine glass lightly and sighed. You're rushing things, she said, and just like that the air changed. My father, Gerald, didn't pause either. He cut into his turkey, knife hitting the plate with a quiet clink. You always make emotional decisions, Ashley. It was Madison, my younger sister, who sealed the sting. She didn't speak, just smirked and reached for the salt like nothing earth-shattering had just been said. I blinked. This is supposed to be happy news. No one answered. The silence stretched long enough for the clock above the fireplace to tick 6 times. I caught Madison rolling her eyes before stabbing another bite of sweet potatoes. A flush crept up my neck. Seriously, my voice cracked. You think this is some reckless whim? I've been with James for 2 years. He's fine, I guess, Madison finally said, still not looking at me. Just seems fast, but then again you always were dramatic. My fork clattered onto the plate. Dramatic, I echoed. Carol folded her napkin and dabbed the corner of her lips. You've always had trouble making sound decisions, sweetheart. We just want what's best for you. No, I snapped, pushing back my chair. You want what's controllable. What fits into your neat little box? Gerald raised a brow but said nothing. I stood up, heart hammering. You didn't ask about the ring or the proposal or how I feel. You didn't even say congratulations. I was shaking now. My hands, my voice, even my breath, all trembling under the weight of being the family disappointment. Madison glanced at our mother and said, Guess she's gonna cry now. That did it. I grabbed my purse, my coat. My breath was shallow, my vision blurred, and still not one of them moved to stop me. As I reached the door, Carol called after me almost absently, Ashley, don't be so emotional. Emotional. It echoed in my head like a curse. I didn't slam the door. I closed it with care, with the dignity they thought I didn't have. But once outside in the cold night air, tears finally spilled. My cheeks burned with shame and betrayal, but somewhere deep inside, under the wreckage, I felt something shift. This wasn't sadness. This was the beginning of something else, something sharper. The city lights blurred through the windshield as James drove us home, his hand gripping mine across the console. I hadn't said a word since we left the house. My cheeks were tight with dried tears, and my voice was a knot of rage and humiliation caught somewhere between my chest and throat. When we pulled into the lot behind our apartment, I sat still, staring at the dashboard clock like it might rewind time. 9:13 p.m. Only an hour had passed since I told them about the engagement. Only 60 minutes, and somehow my entire idea of family now felt like a cruel illusion. James finally broke the silence. Do you want to talk about it, or do you want tea first? That made my lip twitch. I turned to him. His eyes were kind, patient, like he was waiting at the edge of a storm, willing to walk through it if I asked him to. We made it up to our second-floor walk-up in silence. The apartment was still warm from the heater kicking on earlier, and the living room smelled faintly of cinnamon from the candle I forgot to blow out. I dropped my coat on the couch and said, They didn't even ask what day we picked. James leaned against the counter. They didn't ask anything, Ash, not even how you're feeling. I laughed, but it came out hollow. Well, I guess it's official. The only thing more disappointing than being ignored is hoping for something different. He crossed the room in 2 strides and gently took my hand, his thumb brushing my knuckles. You did nothing wrong. You gave them a chance. You showed them joy and they slapped it out of your hand. I looked down at our fingers. They don't want to lose control of me. He nodded. They're afraid you're finally choosing yourself. The tears returned then, but softer. Not the hot, humiliating kind from earlier. These were the kind you cry when someone sees you completely and stays. We sat on the couch, legs tangled, and I leaned against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Outside, rain tapped against the windows, the soft, hypnotic kind that makes the whole world feel slower, safer. I can't keep chasing their approval, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. No, you can't, James murmured into my hair. You've built a life that doesn't need permission. There was a long pause. Then he added, I meant what I said. We move forward without them. If they show up, great. If not, we're still getting married. I want this with you, just you. I clutched his hand tighter. I want that too, he smiled, kissing the top of my head. Then let's make it beautiful on our terms. As the night deepened and the world outside softened under the rain, something inside me began to settle. The pain didn't vanish, but it reshaped. It no longer screamed for validation. Instead, it whispered for peace, for dignity. They could have celebrated with us. They could have embraced this new chapter. Instead, they made their silence louder than any blessing. But I had James. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start healing. The rain stopped hours ago, but the silence it left behind was louder than ever. I lay there staring at the ceiling in our apartment bedroom, while James slept soundly beside me. The faint golden light from the hallway traced the outline of our ceiling fan, spinning slowly like the thoughts circling in my mind. I had smiled through so many slights growing up, brushed off so many digs. But tonight, that dinner, those stares, the absolute refusal to see me, it cracked something I hadn't realized was already splintering. My eyes were dry now, not because I wasn't hurting, but because the pain had settled into something deeper, older. It felt like walking barefoot across memories I hadn't dared revisit in years. Madison always got the bigger room. It's funny what sticks. I remembered the fight, well, not a fight. I remember me arguing and them deciding. You're older, you can handle a smaller space. I was 13, she was 10. The room she got had a bay window and its own half bath. Mine faced the back fence and smelled like dust no matter how often I cleaned it. Then there were the family trips, 4 of us packed into the car. Madison always got the front seat. She gets carsick, Mom would say, even though I did too. But unlike her, I learned not to mention it. One Christmas, we both got charm bracelets. Mine had 3 charms, Madison's had 6. Your sister's younger, Dad had said, like that explained everything. She still believes in magic. So I learned to shrink, to edit myself, to celebrate Madison's victories out loud and swallow my own in silence. And it never stopped. At every school function, it was her name they remembered. Every family party, her laugh that got retold. Even when we both made the honor roll, the congratulatory cake said, "Way to go, Madison." I was 15 when I stopped showing them my report cards. 17 when I realized my job wasn't to be celebrated, it was to stay out of the way. "You're more mature, Ashley," they'd say whenever I asked why I couldn't have what she did. "You're stronger. You understand." But no one ever understood me. I turned onto my side in bed and stared at the outline of James's face in the dark. Even now, even after all this time, I had walked into that dinner hoping for something different. A smile, a hug, a "we're so happy for you." Instead, I got eye rolls and silence and a family-wide shrug. "This is supposed to be happy news," I had said. And it was. It was supposed to be happy. But I was foolish to think happiness alone could melt their ice. Why had I expected them to clap for me when they'd spent a lifetime teaching me my joy was too loud? My chest tightened. I whispered into the dark. Why was I always the one told to understand? The words tasted bitter, but they were mine. I clutched the edge of the blanket and let the memories bleed together. Birthdays where Madison's friends got to stay late, but mine were sent home early. Recitals where Mom forgot to record my solo, school projects where Dad helped Madison with the glue gun but told me to figure it out on my own. I was always second, always adaptable, always fine. They called it strength. But now it felt like erasure. I turned onto my back and stared at the ceiling again. I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't a teenager begging for attention or a 20-something still trying to win their applause. I was getting married, starting a new life, and they'd tried to make even that feel like a mistake. But maybe the real mistake was giving them that much power. The realization didn't feel like a victory. It felt like grieving something that had already died long ago, but no one told me. Maybe it wasn't about fixing things with them. Maybe it was about forgiving myself for ever thinking I had to. My hand reached instinctively for James's. He stirred in his sleep, fingers curling around mine without even waking up. A single tear slid down my cheek, not from pain this time, but from the quiet, almost painful relief of knowing I didn't have to keep chasing something I was never going to get. I had spent my whole life trying to earn my family's love the way some people chase sunsets, beautiful, distant, and always out of reach. But tonight, I saw the sunrise coming, and I was finally ready to walk toward it. The next morning, I woke with a single purpose, not out of spite, not even out of hope for some magical reconciliation, just clarity. I was done waiting for them to become the parents I needed. But I wasn't going to let that stop me from extending one last, dignified hand. James was already up, reading emails at the kitchen table with his coffee half-drunk and a piece of toast going cold beside him. He looked up as I padded in, still in my robe. "I had a thought," I said, brushing a hand through my hair. "What if I design the invitations myself?" His face lit up. "Really?" I nodded. "No frills, just something elegant, clean, us." It took all of 2 hours for the idea to morph into action. I opened my old design software and began crafting something that felt like us: deep cream paper, embossed lettering, a soft gold foil around the edges. The kind of invitation you'd run your fingers across and smile. James came over and kissed my cheek as I adjusted the spacing on our names. "Looks perfect," he said, but even perfect needed stamps and addresses. I hesitated at the envelope section. "They know the extended family list better than we do," I muttered, almost to myself. James looked over, eyes warm but cautious. "You sure you want to go back over there?" "I'm sure," I said. "This is my line in the sand. If they want to be part of it, they can be. But I'm not begging." 2 hours later, I pulled up alone to my parents' home in the suburbs of Atlanta, the same house I grew up in, now colder than any memory I'd let myself feel. The brick path to the door had been pressure-washed recently, still glistening in the autumn sun. The lawn looked like a catalog spread, perfectly edged, lifeless. I rang the bell. Carol opened the door in her usual way, composed, hair brushed back, lips glossed. She didn't smile. "Ashley," she said, neutral. "I have something for you," I replied, just as neutral. I held up the cream folder, my fingers steady. She stepped aside, wordlessly. The house smelled like lemon polish and potpourri, the kind Madison liked. There were fresh flowers on the hallway table, roses. Never my favorite. Dad wasn't home. Madison apparently wasn't either. I placed the stack of invitations on the entryway bench and opened the top to show her. "They're done. I'd appreciate it if you could send these to the extended family. You know all the addresses better than I do." Carol's eyes flicked to the design, the weight of the paper, the shimmer of our names. "They're tasteful," she murmured. I almost laughed. It was the closest thing to a compliment I'd received from her in months. "I included RSVP cards and stamps," I added. There was a pause long enough for her to say something, anything. Instead, she closed the folder and said, "Fine." No eye contact, no warmth, but no refusal either. That was the most I could have hoped for, and I knew it. As I turned to go, I heard her say softly behind me, "Madison thinks it's too soon." I paused, hand on the doorknob. "Madison isn't the one getting married." Carol didn't respond. I looked back at her, my mother, still clinging to an image of control even as her grip slipped. "You don't have to agree," I said quietly. "But I'm doing this, with or without your support." Her lips pressed into that thin line I knew too well. I didn't wait for a reply. I walked out, my heels clicking softly against the tile, the sunlight blinding for a second as I stepped onto the porch. But as I shut the door behind me, something shifted. It wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It was something sturdier, a kind of calm that comes when you do the right thing for yourself, even if no one claps for it. And as I walked back to the car, I realized something surprising. I didn't feel small anymore. The knock on the door startled me. It was late afternoon the next day, and I was in our living room surrounded by high school yearbooks and old photo albums. James had convinced me it might be fun to pull together a wedding slideshow, something personal for the reception. We were laughing over a particularly embarrassing prom picture when I realized I'd left one of the boxes of albums at my parents' house. So I stopped by alone. Just a quick errand, I told myself. In and out. They weren't supposed to be home. The house was quiet when I walked in. The front door had been unlocked, like always, and the smell of furniture polish hung thick in the air. I made my way to the living room, scanning the shelves. And then I saw it, the fireplace. It wasn't lit, but there were faint traces of gray soot curling around the brass grate. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the edge of something white peeking out from the ashes. I frowned and stepped closer. The moment I crouched down and tugged the blackened scrap from the hearth, my heart stopped. It was one of the wedding invitations. Or it had been. The elegant cream paper was scorched, the gold foil edges curling like dead leaves. My name, Ashley Lauren Daniels, was still faintly visible, marred by soot and heat. A second, smaller corner was buried underneath. I reached in and pulled out 3 more charred pieces. Not ash, not accidental. Burned, deliberately. I stood there, the pieces trembling in my hand, the room spinning in silent betrayal. My parents didn't just disapprove. They tried to erase it. My wedding, my joy, my life. They didn't send the invitations. They destroyed them. Unbelievable, I whispered, my voice shaking. They burned them. I stormed into the hallway, fury replacing shock, the evidence still in my grip. "Mom," I yelled. Footsteps came from the kitchen. Gerald appeared, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "What are you yelling about?" I held up the burned papers. His face didn't even twitch. "You burned them," I demanded. Why would you do this?" He sighed, tossing the towel onto the counter like this was beneath him. "You didn't listen to us, Ashley. Don't act shocked when we don't listen to you." "Excuse me," my voice cracked into disbelief. "This is your version of not listening, setting fire to my invitations. You think throwing a tantrum and running out makes you an adult," he snapped. "You've always been impulsive. This wedding is mine," I shouted. "It's my life." Carol stepped into the doorway just then, her face cool, arms crossed. "We did what we thought was necessary," she said simply. "Necessary," I gasped. "To what? Punish me, sabotage my wedding?" "To stop you from making another mistake," she said, like I hadn't just caught them red-handed. The quiet calm in her voice chilled me more than the fire ever could. I stared at them, both of them, and I realized for the first time they weren't disappointed. They were angry that I was moving on without their permission, that I was finally choosing myself. I took a deep breath, my hands still trembling. "I gave you a chance," I said, my voice cracking with heartbreak and fury. "I asked you to be a part of this, and you lit it on fire." "You lit it first," Carol said coldly. "When you stopped being loyal to your family." I laughed once, a hollow, stunned sound. "Loyalty," I whispered. "You don't get to ask for loyalty when all you've given me is comparison, silence, and ash." No one stopped me as I walked out. This time, the door slammed. And for the first time, I didn't look back. We booked the tickets that night. I didn't even pack right away. I just needed the flight confirmation in my inbox, like proof that escape was possible. James had found a boutique resort tucked along the quieter side of Miami Beach. Oceanfront rooms, complimentary breakfast, and a balcony with just enough shade to hide from the world if you wanted to. That's exactly what I wanted. When we landed 2 days later, the sun greeted us like an old friend. No tension, no judgment, just warmth. The air smelled like coconut oil and sea breeze, and for the first time in weeks, my lungs didn't feel like they were carrying invisible weights. We checked into the suite just before sunset. The walls were painted seafoam green, and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a white sand beach that stretched forever. I dropped my bags and walked straight to the balcony, pressing both hands to the glass. James came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Feels like the start of something, doesn't it?" I nodded. "Something that's mine." The next morning, I woke to sunlight and silence, not the strained kind that used to haunt me at home, but the kind that whispered peace. Real peace. We had coffee barefoot on the balcony, our legs tangled under the small table. Later, we wandered through the local markets, tasted fresh mango slices sprinkled with chili, and laughed over matching shell bracelets like teenagers on spring break. It was everything the last few weeks hadn't been. One afternoon, James snapped a photo of me standing in the surf, waves kissing my ankles, my engagement ring catching the light. He posted it with the caption, "The future Mrs. Baker. Engage life #beach bliss." I hesitated before I shared it to my story. Part of me still worried, still flinched at the idea of drawing attention to my happiness. But I did it anyway. The comments started rolling in almost immediately. Friends from college, coworkers, distant cousins, "Stunning. You deserve all the happiness in the world. So happy for you too." And then, Carol, her comment was short, blunt, surgical. "What a waste, you used to care about family." I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over it, paralyzed. There was no emoji, no context. Just that one cold sentence sitting beneath a photo of me smiling in the sun. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat back against the lounge chair and let the wind do what it wanted with my hair. James looked over and saw my face. "What is it?" I turned the screen toward him. He read it, then shook his head slowly. "She saw peace and decided to throw a rock at it." That made me laugh, even though my chest ached. "She's watching me," I said, voice quieter now. "Not because she misses me, but because she wants to measure how far I'll go without her." He reached over and took the phone gently from my hand. Then he deleted the comment. "You're not hers to guilt trip anymore," he said. I leaned into him, my head resting on his shoulder. "You really believe that?" He nodded, brushing a kiss across my forehead. "You're building a new family, and guess what? You're allowed to shut the door on anyone who keeps trying to burn it down." I squeezed his hand tighter. The tide was rising now, washing footprints away as quickly as they were made. Maybe that was the lesson. Some things don't need to be held onto just because they've always been there. Some legacies were made to end. The silence between us used to be filled with childhood laughter, pillow fights, secret handshakes, late-night whispers about who we wanted to be when we grew up. Now it was just silence, cold, stale, laced with too many unspoken things. But I couldn't let it stay that way, not yet. Back home, the scent of Miami still lingered on my clothes. My skin was tanner, my eyes less tired. But inside, something still ached. A small part of me hadn't let go of the idea that maybe, just maybe, my sister would show up for me. Not as a messenger for my parents. Not as someone smirking from across the dinner table. Just as Madison, my little sister, so I called her. My finger hovered over the contact for a few seconds. The screen blurred slightly as I exhaled, willing my voice to be calm, not needy. She picked up after the fourth ring. "Hello!" Her voice was clipped, distracted, like she already regretted answering. "Hey," I said, "it's me." Silence. Then, "Okay," I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "I was wondering if you'd want to come dress shopping with me." A beat, then another. "I thought maybe we could do that together," I added quickly. "You always said I'd cry when I found the dress and you'd need tissues ready." She snorted, not kindly. "That was like 10 years ago." "I know," I said softly, "but I meant it when I said I wanted you there." "Why?" she asked with a bite. "So you can post about it and let Mom and Dad do some more." My throat tightened. "No, because you're my sister." She sighed, an exaggerated, dramatic sigh. "Ashley, I have better things to do." Something inside me shrank. "You can't spare one afternoon. I think you already have your perfect little fiancé and his family to fawn over you." Her voice twisted on the word perfect, like it tasted bitter in her mouth. My fingers clenched around the phone. "You know what? I didn't call to beg." "Oh, you definitely didn't need to," she said, almost laughing now. "You've made it very clear you're done with us." I swallowed hard. "I just wanted one moment with my sister, one." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before making everything about you," she snapped. And with that, she hung up. I stared at the phone, the screen still lit with her name, like it couldn't believe the call ended that way either. There was no scream, no final word, just an empty click. And then silence again. Later that evening, I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone still in my hand. James came in, a grocery bag looped around his arm. "Everything okay?" I tried to smile. It didn't work. "I called Madison." He dropped the bag gently onto the counter. "And she said no." My voice barely carried. "Said she had better things to do." He came over and sat beside me. I looked down at my lap. "It's not even about the dress, James, I think. I just needed to know if there was still any version of her that wanted to stand beside me." He reached for my hand. There's a version of you that's already standing without her. I blinked back the sting in my eyes. I keep offering them olive branches, and they keep lighting them on fire, he said gently. Ash, that's not on you. I nodded, tears finally slipping free. I didn't want to get married without my sister, I whispered. But maybe I need to. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me in close. And this time I didn't resist the comfort, because maybe sisterhood wasn't always bound by blood. And maybe, just maybe, I was about to discover a new kind of family. I almost canceled the appointment. After Madison hung up, I'd stared at my calendar for an hour, trying to convince myself I didn't care, that the dress didn't matter, that maybe we could just elope and skip all the ceremony. But James had been quiet, waiting. And then he'd said the simplest thing. What if you didn't have to go alone? So that Saturday, I met Lena, James's younger sister, at the boutique. She was already waiting when I arrived, perched nervously on a velvet settee, scrolling through bridal magazines with her purse tucked beneath her feet like a schoolgirl at her first dance. She wore light-washed jeans and a soft lilac sweater, and when she saw me, her face lit up in this bashful, wide-eyed way that made something inside me unclench. You came, I said, surprised at how relieved I sounded. Of course I came, she said, standing. Your family. That word. It settled in me like warmth in winter. The boutique was small but elegant, white brick walls, tall mirrors, soft music floating from hidden speakers. Racks of ivory and lace lined the showroom, each dress whispering promises of transformation. The consultant, a cheerful woman named Rena, offered us mimosas before whisking me away to the fitting room. Lena sat outside, legs crossed, fingers poised over her phone to snap pictures for James. The first few dresses were beautiful, sure, but none of them felt right. Too stiff, too sparkly, too not me. But then the fourth dress, cream lace, a deep V-neckline that skimmed just above tasteful, fitted bodice, soft flare at the hips, no glitz, just grace. I stepped out of the fitting room and Lena gasped. You look like yourself, she whispered, eyes glossy. I turned to the mirror, and I saw it. Not the daughter trying to prove something, not the sister waiting for permission, just me, soft, strong, standing. I think this is it, I murmured, voice thick. Lena stood, reaching into her bag for a tissue. Okay, I wasn't gonna cry, but here we are. I laughed, blinking away my own tears. It's not too much, right? It's exactly enough, she said. We took photos, some silly, some serious, and even the boutique staff clapped when I finally said yes to the dress. It was a good moment. The kind you file away in your heart for later. A rare one. Later that night, back at home, I sat on the couch scrolling through the photos Lena had sent me. In the final one, I was mid-laugh, hand over my mouth, the dress flowing around me like I'd always belonged in it. I smiled. Then my screen buzzed. A notification. Comment from Carol Daniels. I clicked without thinking. Too much cleavage. How selfish can one bride be? I didn't move. The photo sat beneath her words like a punchline. It didn't matter that I was glowing. It didn't matter that I had chosen the dress with joy and care. She found something to criticize, to diminish, to twist into shame. My hands started to tremble, not from shock, but from the slow, creeping realization that even my most vulnerable, hopeful moments weren't safe from her. James walked in a second later, holding a bowl of popcorn. He took one look at my face and froze. What happened? I turned the phone toward him. He read the comment. His jaw clenched. She saw you happy, he said quietly, and had to punish you for it. I nodded. But you know what I see, he added, setting the bowl down. I see a woman who walked into that store and owned every inch of herself, who didn't wait for applause, who glowed. I blinked back the tears. She's not trying to protect you, he continued. She's trying to remind you of your place, but it's her place that's disappearing, and she knows it. I swallowed hard. You looked like the woman I fell in love with today, he said. And no comment gets to rewrite that. I exhaled. And then, for the first time, I did something unthinkable. I blocked her. Just one tap. Simple. Final. It didn't fix everything. But it felt like I'd slammed shut a door I had waited far too long to close. The restaurant was one of those quiet little gems tucked between antique shops on a tree-lined street. Brick walls, wide windows, and fairy lights wound around the outdoor patio. A place where conversation didn't need to compete with the noise. James's parents had invited us out for lunch, just the four of us. At first, I'd been hesitant. Not because I didn't like them. If anything, their kindness unnerved me. It was so unfamiliar, effortless. Like they weren't trying to prove anything. They just showed up and cared. We arrived a few minutes early, and I fiddled with my napkin, straightening it and refolding it twice. James gently rested a hand over mine. "They're excited to see you," he said. The door opened then, and in walked Marlene and Doug Baker, his mom in soft blue linen and his dad in a classic polo, both with the kind of smiles that made strangers smile back. Marlene walked straight to me, arms open. "There's our beautiful bride-to-be." She hugged me before I could even stand. Doug followed, shaking my hand like we were already family. "Ashley, you're glowing, must be love or Miami sunshine." We laughed, ordered drinks, and settled in. For a while we just talked about the wedding, work, travel. But somewhere between the shrimp bisque and the shared dessert, the conversation shifted. Doug pulled out his phone, swiping through photos. "We were organizing old boxes last week and found these gems." He passed the phone to me. It was James, age 4, covered in finger paint, grinning so wide it almost hurt to look at. Then another of him in oversized pajamas holding a teddy bear. One of him missing 2 front teeth and another with Marlene kissing the top of his head at his high school graduation. They weren't just pictures, they were proof of love, of pride, of presence. "I didn't know parents could feel like this," I whispered before I could catch myself. Marlene looked at me gently. "Oh, sweetheart." I flushed. "Sorry." That just sort of slipped out. "No need to apologize," she said, reaching for my hand. "You're part of this family now, that means your pain matters here too." The words hit something deep. I blinked fast, nodding. "We've been praying for someone like you," Doug added. "Not just for James, but for us. You bring something steady to him, you make him better, that means the world to us." I swallowed hard. There was no subtext, no manipulation, just kindness for kindness's sake. And I realized I'd never sat through a meal like this. One where I wasn't measuring every word. One where I didn't feel like I had to earn my seat. I belonged here. As we walked back to the car, the wind picked up, warm and full of late summer promise. James laced his fingers through mine. "You okay?" I nodded, holding tighter. "I think I'm finally starting to be." Back home, I placed a small box of lemon cookies Marlene had packed for me on the kitchen counter. Then I slipped into the bedroom, kicked off my shoes, and sat at the edge of the bed. For a long moment, I just sat there, letting the quiet settle around me. And then I whispered, not to anyone, just to the air, to myself. I didn't lose a family. I just stopped mistaking distance for devotion. Because today, I'd seen what love looked like when it wasn't something you had to chase. The morning of my wedding, the air felt like it was holding its breath. Sunlight spilled through the curtains of the bridal suite, warm and full of promise. Outside, the city hummed, soft traffic, faint laughter, the bustle of lives continuing. But up here it was quiet, sacred. My own small pocket of stillness before everything changed. I stood in my robe, staring out over the skyline, hands folded against the cool glass. Below, the venue staff moved like clockwork, placing centerpieces, adjusting chairs, fluffing white linens. Every detail we'd spent months planning was finally falling into place. I should have felt joy. Peace, butterflies maybe, but what I felt standing there was something sharper, readiness. My makeup artist had just started unpacking brushes when my phone buzzed on the vanity table. I saw the name and something in my chest tightened. "Mom," I hesitated. For a long moment I just stared. Half of me still expected, hoped, that it might be a last-minute apology, a picture of them dressed and on their way. Even now, that tiny, bruised part of me wanted them to come. But when I opened the text, it read, "We're not coming, Madison's having a party." That was it, no explanation, no emotion, just a 5-word knife to the heart. I sat down slowly as if my knees had stopped trusting the floor. My makeup artist looked over, sensing the shift in the air. "Everything all right? Give me just a minute," I whispered. She nodded and quietly stepped into the hallway. I stared at the screen again. "We're not coming. Madison's having a party, not sorry, not we love you, but just you lost." They weren't bluffing. They weren't waiting for a plea, they were choosing her, again, always. It wasn't just an absence, it was a message. I typed back, "That's your choice, I'm still getting married." And I hit send. There was no satisfaction in it, just silence. until the phone rang, of course, because control was never about distance. It was about the final word. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. "Hello," Carol's voice hissed on the other end, all sharp consonants and cold fury. "You're seriously doing this without us?" I stayed still. "Yes. You're abandoning your family," she spat, as if I'd committed some grand betrayal. I exhaled through my nose, keeping my voice even. "No, Mom, I'm just done abandoning myself to keep you comfortable." There was a pause. Then the biting tone returned. "Don't twist this around. We have always done everything for you. Everything." I blinked, stunned by how deeply she believed that. Everything but show up when it mattered. "You've become so dramatic. Is that James's influence?" "No, that's clarity." Another silence. "Then you think you're better than us now?" "No," I said quietly. "I think I've finally stopped asking for scraps." On the other end, I could hear her breathing hard, like she was gearing up for one last performance, but I was done. I didn't need the last word. I just needed the last boundary. "Goodbye, Mom." And I ended the call. This time I didn't tremble, I didn't cry, I felt. Clean, the kind of clean that only comes after you let the poison bleed out. I set the phone on the vanity and looked at my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back, shoulders back, jaw strong, eyes fierce. But she looked ready. The makeup artist returned moments later, her voice soft and professional. "Would you like to begin?" "Yes," I said, straightening. "Let's start." She swept foundation across my skin with practiced hands. I let her. I didn't need armor today. I had my truth. Outside, the sweet laughter echoed. Lena's voice, Marlene's, joy that didn't have to be earned or bargained for. I was walking into a future not shaped by old wounds, but chosen love. And as my lips were painted a soft, steady rose, I whispered to myself in the mirror, "You are not their shame. You are your own beginning." The ballroom shimmered like a dream I'd almost forgotten how to believe in. Cascading ivory curtains, tables draped in gold-trimmed linen. Twinkling fairy lights arched over the aisle like a soft cathedral of stars. And at the end of that aisle, James. He stood in his navy suit, chest proud, eyes locked on mine with such fierce tenderness it nearly undid me. I didn't float down the aisle. I walked deliberately, slowly, every step a declaration. I am here. I am whole. I am not theirs anymore. The guests rose as the music swelled, but I only saw him, James. The man who stood beside me when my own family turned away. The man who never once asked me to be smaller. When I reached him, he took my hand and whispered, "You made it." And I smiled, not just with my mouth, but with every scar that had finally found a reason to fade. The ceremony was short and intimate. Vows written by hand, promises born from pain and stitched together with hope. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, James kissed me like we'd survived something, and we had. Applause. Tears, flashbulbs. Lena hugged me like a sister. Marlene cried into her program. Doug offered a handshake that turned into a hug so strong it nearly knocked me over. There was champagne. Laughter. A meal so delicious no one noticed the seating chart had 3 empty spots where Carol, Gerald, and Madison should have been. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. The people who mattered were already there. It wasn't until the cake was being cut that everything began to unravel. James had just slipped a small bite between my lips, and I was laughing, really laughing for the first time in what felt like years. And then my phone vibrated in my clutch. Once, twice, again, I ignored it. Then Lena's eyes widened from across the table. She mouthed, "Look at your phone." I pulled it out, screen lighting up with message after message. Voicemails. Missed calls, notifications from group chats blowing up, then a FaceTime call from Carol. I rejected it. Then another. This time, curiosity, or maybe reflex, got the better of me. I answered. Her face filled the screen, blotchy and red, mascara smudged. "You didn't even invite us to this spectacle," she shrieked, voice echoing through the speaker loud enough for nearby guests to turn. I stared at her. "You burned your invitation," I said flatly. "Remember," and I hung up. But it wasn't over. The ballroom doors burst open so suddenly the music faltered. Gasps rippled through the crowd. And there they were, Carol, Gerald, Madison, marching down the center aisle like they owned the place, dressed not for a wedding, but for war. Madison's tight red dress was better suited for a nightclub. Carol looked like she hadn't slept. Gerald's mouth was already moving, hands gesturing as if the cameras flashing could somehow validate their outrage. "What is this?" one guest whispered. I stepped forward, hand instinctively finding James's. They stopped 10 feet from the head table. "You've embarrassed us," Carol snapped. "You humiliated your own family." Lena stood beside me now, voice low but fierce. "Security's already on the way." "You're making a scene," I said, calm, too calm. Gerald pointed a finger. "You excluded us from your life, don't act like the victim now." "I didn't exclude you," I said. "I protected myself." The crowd was silent, every eye on us, every camera now recording. I stepped closer. "You didn't come to support me. You came to steal something from me again." Carol's mouth opened, but I raised a hand. "You don't get to do that anymore," I said. "You don't get to rewrite the story." Behind them, 2 suited men approached. One touched Gerald's shoulder. James leaned into me, voice steady. "Do you want them gone?" "Yes." He nodded to security. Seconds later, the shouting turned into a shuffle. Gasps turned into applause. And just like that, my past was escorted out the door. The ballroom felt still after they were gone. Not quiet, guests were still murmuring, glasses clinking, music humming softly, but still. Like the room itself had exhaled. I stood at the edge of the dance floor, barefoot now, heels kicked off somewhere near the sweetheart table. My dress was slightly wrinkled, hair a little undone, but I'd never felt more beautiful, more myself. James came up behind me, slipping his arms around my waist. "They're gone," he murmured. I leaned back against his chest, nodding. "I know." We stood there like that for a while, no words, no movement, just heartbeats and soft music and the weight of everything that didn't happen pressing into the space we'd made for joy. "They showed who they were," he said eventually. "And so did you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I don't think I've ever felt so. Calm, not even happy, just clear. He kissed the top of my head. "That's what happens when you stop carrying people who never intended to walk beside you." I turned to face him. "I didn't lose a family," I said softly. "I finally found one." He smiled, pulling me in for a kiss. And this time, no one interrupted. Later that night in our honeymoon suite, I stepped out of the dress and into a hotel robe that smelled like lavender and linen. My makeup was mostly gone, my hair in a messy twist, and my heart, surprisingly, was light. James had ordered room service, strawberries, chocolate, a bottle of champagne on ice. We didn't toast. We didn't make speeches. We just curled up together on the wide bed, backs against a mountain of pillows, legs tangled beneath the duvet. The lights were low. Music played from a small speaker, something soft, piano and wind and ocean sounds. And in that small, still moment, I realized something else. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't arrive with banners or fireworks. It crept in when no one was looking, when all the noise was finally silenced. James brushed a piece of hair from my face. "You okay?" I nodded. "More than okay." He hesitated. "Do you regret not having them there?" I thought about it, really thought. "No," I said. "I regret hoping for something they never had to give." He nodded, quiet. "I spent years thinking if I just said it the right way or waited long enough or proved myself hard enough, they'd wake up and love me right." I looked down at our hands laced together. "But they don't love like that. They love with rules, with winners and losers. And I'm done playing." James didn't speak. He just squeezed my hand. A few minutes passed in silence before I whispered, "I thought today would break me." "It almost did," he said gently. I smiled. "But instead, it built me." 6 months later, the air smelled different, crisper, sweeter, like something new had taken root. James and I had moved into a quiet home just outside the city, a craftsman-style house with a lemon tree in the yard and sun that poured through the kitchen window like honey. There were still boxes left to unpack. Rooms half-decorated. But it already felt like home. Because for the first time, the space we lived in didn't carry echoes of someone else's disapproval. Only joy, only peace. Tonight we were hosting a small dinner. Just us, Lena and James's parents. Nothing extravagant, rosemary chicken, fresh bread, a lemon pie I tried to make from scratch, keyword, tried. I'd set the table with linen napkins and the mismatched ceramic plates we found at a flea market last month. It was simple, warm. Enough, I was in the kitchen lighting the last candle when James walked in holding a card-sized envelope. He didn't say anything at first, just held it out. It was ivory, thick paper, my mother's handwriting. I took it slowly, turning it over in my hands. No postage stamp, no return address. Just Ashley, no daughter. No Mrs. Baker. No note on the back. I didn't open it. I placed it gently on the bookshelf between a photo of James and me in Miami and a tiny pair of knit booties Lena had gifted me last week. James stepped closer, eyes on me. You don't have to read it. I know. He waited. Do you want to talk about it? I smiled. Not tonight. And that was enough. Dinner was loud in the best way. Doug told stories about James's high school soccer years, most of them slightly exaggerated, all of them hilarious. Marlene brought baby pictures again, laughing through the embarrassment of a bathtub photo. Lena kept stealing extra rolls and whispering, Don't judge me, I skipped lunch. At one point, I laughed so hard I had to put my fork down. My hand drifted to my stomach where everything suddenly felt real and alive. When the laughter faded, I cleared my throat. So, we actually have some news, I said, eyes flicking toward James. He smiled and reached for my hand. Marlene's eyes lit up instantly. You're pregnant, Lena shrieked. Doug nearly knocked over his wine. The reactions were so pure, so full of joy that for a second I had to bite my lip just to keep from crying. You're bringing new life into this family, Marlene said, her voice shaky with happy tears. What a gift! And just like that, I realized something. I had broken the pattern. Whatever history I came from, whatever cold silence or seared invitations or withered apologies, I wasn't carrying it forward. I wasn't passing it down. After everyone left, I padded barefoot into the living room and stood in front of the bookshelf. The envelope was still there, unopened, and I realized it could stay that way. I didn't need whatever apology she'd scrawled inside, or whatever excuse, or plea, or backhanded blessing. Because I already knew who I was, a woman who had learned to say goodbye to pain without inviting it back in for one more explanation. I picked up the envelope, walked to the fireplace, and tucked it into the drawer beside the matches. Not to burn, not to frame, just to rest it somewhere I no longer lived. As I crawled into bed, James pulled me into his chest. Think the baby heard all the screaming about high school soccer stats? He murmured. I laughed. Poor kid. He kissed my forehead. They're going to have a beautiful life. And I believed him. Because finally, so would I have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to love you most? How did you find your peace? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story too. And if Ashley's journey meant something to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There are more stories like this coming soon. You are never alone. Not anymore.